Welcome to the Friday Power Lunch, a weekly show amplifying the voices of the Virginia grassroots. Each week, we provide engaging conversations about politics, culture, and women making change. Produced by the unstoppable women of Network Nova, our motto is, when we vote, we win. The Friday Power Lunch is recorded before a live Zoom audience. Follow us on social media. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and show us some love and become a sponsor through Patreon. The Friday Power Lunch. Badass women getting things done.
So it is Friday, January 20th. Welcome to the Friday Power Lunch. I'm Catherine White, your host, bringing you the guests, the issues, the action, because we are fueling the grassroots community to get things done and to make politics fun. So let's get to it. We're glad you're here today with us. Our theme today is Let's Get Louder, pumping up the volume on freedom and democracy. And I'm so excited to bring our two guests into this show today. I want to first start with Simon Rosenberg. He is the president of the New Democratic Network, and that is a liberal think tank and advocacy organization. Hello, Simon. How are you doing?
I'm great. It's great to be here. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, I was, when we were talking the other day, you were talking about your background in the Clinton war room in those days when, you have a background in news producing, and now you're back in the saddle, and you have a new war room behind you.
Yeah, my son's bedroom, my oldest son's bedroom. I have too many kids, so space is a premium here in our house, and but it's really great to be with all of you. I'm inspired by your opening, by the way. If I'm going to steal, I may have to steal that. We got to make that a national thing for everybody, for all the groups around the country. I
agree. I think people have come on the show and have said just that. I think we need a show like this in every state. So glad you're here and you're all ready to go and comfortable. And we're really excited to get to this conversation. And next up, all the way from Michigan, Professor Frank Ravitch. You're an expert on religion and law. You're an author of so many books, Frank, and articles. And we're so excited to speak on this subject of law and religion. But first, how are you doing over there? How's Michigan?
I'm doing great, and I'm happy to be here. And Michigan is doing great. We had a very, very good election here. The state legislature, for the first time since I've been here, has gone completely Democrat on both sides, and of course, Governor Whitmer, who's wonderful, was reelected. So it's really
it's good to be in the blue. I mean,
it is a blue state now, which is really surprising, because since I moved here from Pennsylvania, I grew up in Philly, and it had been purple, but we are firmly blue.
Yeah, and you got to hold on to that blue. As the Virginia story tells you, I have to stay in the game for sure to hold that. But that's so great. And I have one thing to say to you. I didn't tell you, but I'm a Buckeye alum. So go Bucks.
Well, I played. I was at Tulane. I played for Tulane. So we won the Cotton Bowl, which honestly, I never thought would happen, that we would be in anything major. And so, I got nothing against the Buckeyes. Nothing against the Buckeyes.
So we'll have a good convo today. Frank, it's great to see you. And it's really important to talk about what's happening at the Supreme Court level, especially when we're talking about this rise of what's been going on with the social conservatism and how it's being used in the courts to really undermine our freedom. So thank you, Frank.
We're in a different world.
And excited to be in the room and see all these great faces. Jen Kitchen, give a little wave out there. How you doing? Rules of the road. We use the chat to communicate. Make sure you're telling people what you're doing if you want to share your events. But if you super get unfriendly, the big boss up there, Stare, will kick you out of the room. She doesn't mess around, so you don't want to mess with the boss. And our favorite part of the community is the after chat. At 1:00, we shut everything down and we get into community, and it's your chance to use the platform to share what you're doing. And sometimes the guests can stick around and talk, and I think today we can make that happen. And lastly, support the show. Become a patron. Thank you for those that are a patron and supporting the show. because truthfully, what we're going to talk about today is getting louder. And that's exactly what we've been doing this last 3 years with the show. It's investing in groups like ours that actually are making a difference and building community. So throw us a few bucks in our coffee cup. It will go a long way. And let's see, I think my favorite part of the show is bringing up Fennell Norton, co-host, to get busy and get loud together. Let's talk about what's on your mind. What do you want to get loud about today?
So here's what I want to get loud about today. Remember last week, we ended with the quote, and it was to put a little bit of bold in everything you do. And so this is what I heard exactly. So this is what I heard today or yesterday or something. They said, oh my goodness, the Democrats are giddy because of these people that we have on these committees. And they were like, they shouldn't be giddy. But if you're going to put a little bit of bold in everything you do, I think that if you have someone on the Oversight Committee and the Homeland Security Committee, whatever committee they're on, these are really big committees, and they believe that forest fires are started by space lasers, along with the other kind of nutty stuff, I think that they can be a little bit giddy with the kind of Democrats that we have in the House, as well as the really, really awesome Biden administration full of diversity and talented people. That's what I think.
That's what that's good, because what we're seeing is obviously the start of this dysfunction right after this election, right? And then then you see all these people that were part of the insurrection have these leadership roles, right? And now we're heading into a debt ceiling. I think today, isn't it right? Today, we're kind of the day where the debt ceiling is like, we've met it, we need to pay our bills. And so this is really something to say that why we do have to get into this work and work together is that the MAGA extremists, they're here. They're actually now in the House. The Fox is in the in-house in a big way. And that's frustrating because you're like, so much success, and then you're like, hey, how are these folks still here?
Exactly. And so this is what makes this conversation today so important, is that we have to have conversations in a way that makes it easy for everyday folks to understand why it's an important conversation. I mean, I can think when there was a time when I would hear something about the debt ceiling and I'd be like, yeah, whatever. But right now we understand, and things are so much more in your face. It's important to be able to talk about why it matters. And I remember I had done this research before for school. And I was like, well, when is the last time, we were rated? 2011 was a big fight like this. And we went from a AAA to a AA. And that matters when it comes to how people pay bills, how we pay bills. And it matters in terms of a whole bunch of things that affect people at their kitchen tables. And that's how we have to sort of have this conversation about the debt ceiling and why it's important to talk to your friends and your family and your neighbors about why it matters and why the people who are in office who are causing this fight matter.
Yeah, exactly. And, we see it in Virginia, and Heidi on the team was talking about the scandalous Governor Youngkin really going after one of the most prominent and successful school systems really in the country, and actually using the AG like a little Gestapo guy to go in there and start to really insert fear into people that want to, be teachers or sit on school boards. And so getting ready for the 2023 election, they're trying to set the narrative and get into people's headspace. And that's where, we came in. And, Heidi pointed out that it was MLK Day on Monday. The governor had actually took him out of the education curriculum and then tried to celebrate Martin Luther King Day. So it's the irony and hypocrisy does not get lost on many of us. And like we said, it's almost funny, but it isn't, right? Because it's so dangerous what we're seeing. We're in this time that Simon Rosenberg will talk about, that we do have to stand up as patriots for our country, that this is the time and the calling where we need to come together and understand really what is it here, right? But then there's the frustration is the laying in bed thinking, how do we get loud to say, this is bullshit, it's what's happening. So
Catherine, that's why I think, and I'll just keep saying it, because we have to remember that the folks on this phone call are at a completely different level than everybody else. And so we have to think about how have conversations that make sense to people because they don't have time. They only have a few minutes. We got a split second to get information in. And so that's why this is important, because we get little bits of nuggets that we can use, not talking to us, but talking to other people who don't have the time and energy to think about how to develop that conversation.
Yeah. Oh, look, and I just want to make sure the rules of the road, just to let people know. Arlene, welcome. If you, for the hand up section, that's after 1 o'clock. So if you have a question or anything like that, we will see you in the after chat, but please put it in the live chat down there, and one of the guests will see it and maybe address your comment. So thank you, Arlene. I love it. So let's just get to it for now. I'm saying let's just get right out of the gate, talk to Simon let's pull up Simon Rosenberg. We're both going to sit and listen. And hello, Simon. Let me introduce you again for people that are just coming in the room. Political strategist, thought leader. I know you love that. Commentator, president of the New Democratic Network. And, just so you know, I'm part of a grassroots coalition with Swing Left. And I went on that call. That's where I saw you. And I was like, holy cow, we had been trying to bring our group up with a positive optimism because we are struggling against this demoralization and this propaganda machine that was just really hitting us. So we just really wanted to get you on today to kind of talk about what's going on. First, I want to ask a question to the room. We sent out to see who did their homework today. We had sent out the link with Simon had done your political analysis. If you haven't done your homework, there's still time later to read about it, but you don't want to miss. It's a really in-depth. Simon, let's go over it in an abbreviated format, but tell us why are we here today? Really, what happened in this past election that got you in your son's bedroom, constantly being on phone calls, doing whatever you can to get loud? What brought you to this moment? Tell us the background.
Well, listen, Catherine and Robin, for now, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. And thanks to all of you for being proud patriots and fighting for your country and not letting the MAGAs take over this remarkable country of ours. And so, I've been making myself available to groups like this for the last 6 or 7 months because I was so impressed by the passion and love of country and intensity that I was finding in the new grassroots of the Democratic Party. And it really has been the fuel in my tank, what's kept me going. I mean, part of the reason, for those of you who know the story of what happened over the last 6 months, where I sort of took on the idea that there was a red wave, and Tom Bonnier and I and a handful of us, Maria Cardona, Joe Trippi, stood fast and said that we felt this was going to be a close competitive election because we were aware that the red wave was being used exactly in the way Catherine was describing, which was as a way of demoralizing all of us. Professor Snyder, Timothy Snyder, in the remarkable book that he wrote, Lessons About Autocracy, I'm forgetting the name of it, but the first lesson is do not obey in advance. And what he means is that do not allow the reality of the big argument, right, and the big lie to become your argument and your reality, and you've got to stand fast. And so I stood in front of the red wave. The red wave didn't come. And in part, though, one of the reasons I was so confident about my analysis was gatherings like this that I did all over the country, where I saw that Democrats were actually fired up and ready to go and were fighting with all that they had. And it gave me the faith that I was correct. And thank God I was, right? I mean, thank God that what we had in this election was really the way I describe it. Let me just say the top line about where we are. I just want to get this out in the beginning. The country is better off. Joe Biden has been a good president. The Democratic Party is strong. And as we head into 2024, I would rather be us than them, right? That is the bottom line. And that, what we heard over the last year, and all of you know this, right? There was so much. Democrats had lost faith in themselves, right? We had turned on each other. We were fighting. There was negativity in our family. Now, I think what we have to think about as we head into 2024 is we're strong, they're weak. We're united, they're divided. We have strong campaigns, they struggle to raise money and put together real campaigns. We have great candidates like Tim Kaine. They have great, Oz and all the crazy people, right? It's the inverse of what we were feeling over the last 6 months, which is we've got to flip this now, go on offense, get loud, and have confidence in our values, our arguments, and things we believe against the radicalization and extremism of MAGA. What happened in the election was there were two elections. There was a bluer election inside the battleground, like in Michigan, and you'll hear about that in a little bit, and a redder election outside the battleground. What's remarkable, despite high inflation and Joe Biden's low approval rating and typical midterm dynamics, we actually gained ground in Arizona, Colorado, Georgia, Michigan, Minnesota, New Hampshire, and Pennsylvania. An extraordinary achievement, right? Probably Virginia, by the way. I just didn't include it in that list. And for how everyone thought this election was going to play out, that we gain ground as a community, as a family in these critical battleground states going to 2020, it's an extraordinary achievement and one that we all have to be unbelievably proud of, particularly given the downward pressure of the national narrative on all of our heads. And so in the places where we had, because of our new muscular grassroots, we had the biggest campaigns that we've ever had. Our candidates had more money than they ever have. And I think that's a permanent condition now. That our candidates are raising 2, 3, 4 times, 5 times as much money as they did 10 or 12 years ago. What it meant in this election is it meant we could control the information environment. We could define them as being too crazy and too extreme. But it also meant that at a grassroots level, because of all the volunteerism and the size of these campaigns, we were able to go on in GOTV and voter contact, we were able to start reaching voters that we just never had the capacity to reach before. And it's why I wrote a piece a year before the election that I felt it was not going to be a close competitive election and not a wave, because I understood what was happening at the grassroots conceptually. Now I understand it much more viscerally than I did, where I knew we were going to be able to prevent what's called midterm drop-off. But what it means for you as you go into this election, and those of you who've been on the ground in recent elections, you know that because of this money now, that we can start going into reach voters that we never were able to reach before as Democrats. That matters for us because there are more Democrats than Republicans, but we have more new and irregular voters. The ability for us to go deeper into GOTV targets is a transformative event for the Democratic Party. I don't think people really understand the significance of this for how we run our politics. We have a huge structural advantage on the ground, all of you and all of your compatriots, your fellow patriots all around the country who are building similar grassroots, bottom-up to Tocquevillian kind of organizations that we're seeing all across the country, is that this is a huge strategic advantage for us now as we head into 2024. And it's one of the things that I learned in my journey about how powerful this community has become, groups like yours all around the country. It's a big advantage. But what happened outside the battleground is that we lost ground. And that has to be the admonition to us, right? We fell back in the 4 biggest states in the country, New York, California, Texas, and Florida, because we didn't have these big muscular campaigns that were able to control the information environment and turn out our voters. And so the lesson is, Catherine, and you know what I'm about to say, is that at a national level, we need to get louder. We have to take seriously every day now our role, not just as activists and people knocking on doors and writing postcards, but we also have to get involved, as you're doing in the Virginia legislature, it sounds like, to get loud every day, 24/7, 365, not just in campaigns. Their machinery that's pumping out their propaganda operates all of the time. It took them a generation to build it. Yes. It is sophisticated, powerful, networked, amplified in every way, right? They don't have better ideas, but they're louder than we are at a national level. They can create things like fentanyl and Halloween candy, red wave, the fact that women don't care about having their reproductive rights taken away, right? All these ridiculous memes in this last election that dominated the discourse, that is still the case. So part of what I'm doing now as an evangelist for this new politics that we're all feeling and that all of you are creating is we've got to take our job as information warriors very seriously. We have to become more networked and more amplified as what you're doing. We have to recognize that I helped build the war room 30 years ago in the Clinton campaign. The war room today isn't 20 sweaty kids with Red Bulls in a headquarters somewhere pumping out video and talking points. It's now 4 million patriots getting up every day and being loud and spreading good messages about the Democratic Party and our good works through our networks. We have the ability to counter the right. I think that the key is all of you. It's not just the organizations that I did an event this week with groups like Resolute Square and David Rothkopf's Deep State Radio and Courier Newsroom, which is here in Virginia, and the Midas Touch. We have these powerful new organizations that have grown up, that are doing their part in democracy and fighting and countering the right every day. But to me, I think where we're really going to make a lot of headway in the next 2 years is by having just all of you take seriously every day this idea that you're in an information war, and that the 20 people you reach through your emails or your posting or whatever it is, it all adds up, right, across the country to reaching millions and tens of millions of people. We aren't networked. We aren't amplified, right, as a national party. That hasn't happened yet. It's something that is really critical that it does in the next 2 years in order to make sure that we both have these muscular campaigns that we have that can beat them in the battlegrounds. We know we can win in the battlegrounds, but we also need to control the national discourse as well. If we can do both of those things, we can really deeply wound MAGA and hopefully really start to loosen the grip of MAGA on the National Republican Party, which has to be our goal, right? I think what we all want is a sane center-right party again in America, right? Let's have a debate with them, but MAGA is a material threat. It's why all of you are here. It's why all of you have taken the steps that you can take. Your silly governor, who has been so out of place, right, in so many ways for modern Virginia. It's an embarrassment for the state in many ways, your governor. And so what I'll end with is that I think at a national level, there are going to be 3 big debates this year. You've got your debates in Virginia. You've got your elections, and congratulations on the great flip, the state Senate flip a couple of weeks ago. But at a national level, here are the big 3 debates that we need your help on. One is on the economy, debt ceiling. We're going to have a big economic and fiscal debate. We need to win it. The Republicans shouldn't be beating us on economic issues. I do a presentation called With Democrats, Things Get Better, which I'll be doing next week if you want to come. And one of the data points I show is that since 1989, there have been 47 million jobs created in America. 45 million of those have been created under Democratic presidents, 96%. We shouldn't be losing the economic debate to the Republicans. Second is we're going to be having a debate about war, security, the West, Ukraine, all these things. We need to win that debate as well. We can't let the pro-Putin wing of the Republican Party derail our successful efforts to wound Putin and to keep the West together and defend Ukraine. And then finally, I think we are going to have a big debate about immigration. And this is going to be consequential. It's needed. We need to have this conversation. Again, we're on the right side of this issue. And I think in any kind of sustained debate, we can win it. But you can't, in anything you do, you can't score unless you shoot, right? You can't win a debate unless you engage in it. And I think we've got to roll up our sleeves and get to work on these 3 big things. So I'll just say this. My final point is, I've been doing this a long time. I've been full-time in Democratic politics for 30 years. I think the Democratic Party is stronger today than it's been in any other time since I've been in this business. We are watching the beginning of a generational turn that's going to be very meaningful for us as Democrats. Nancy Pelosi's graceful handing of the baton to Hakeem Jeffries was such an inspiring moment for our democracy and for our party. But we also have to recognize we're in a period where the leaders that we've come to know, Bernie Sanders, Joe Biden, the Clintons, right? Tim Kaine even was, debating about whether to continue. He's older than I thought he was, by the way. I didn't realize that he's in his 70s. Yeah, he looks amazing, right? Is that generation is going to start now turning over to the next generation. And I can tell you, if you start making an inventory of that generation, right? Wes Moore in Maryland, Gavin Newsom in California, Jared Polis in Colorado, Hakeem Jeffries, now our passionate and spirited leader. That party, if you really just write it all down and make a long list of folks, right? That is a wonderful, strong party. right? One that we can get behind and be proud of, and that generational handoff from that older generation that is receding to the new one is going to be an exciting moment for us to all be part of over the coming years. And that's why, as I end here, right, I'd rather be us than them in every possible way. Thanks, Catherine, for the opportunity.
Yeah.
Happy to take some questions.
Sure, true that. I mean, no doubt. And I'm so grateful for that just big picture look. And I love also, and I was listening the other day when you were on with the 4 media organizations, that you are very intentional in this national kind of project. You really want to get the word out with your language and your framing and your branding of it. You use the word family a lot, and you use these kind of familiar words. Tell me, why is that? Like, just real quick. I think that's really smart. I mean, you're already coming out trying to just frame this up in relationship, and relationships are obviously very important in our work.
You know, I grew up in a family of 6 kids. And so I joke that I had to build a coalition just to get dinner at the dinner table every night. And I do think growing up in a family, you know, and all of us who grew up in large families know the glory and the craziness of that, right? I do think it helped me understand about politics. And I think that, you know, I wrote the foreword to Marcos from Daily Kos, you know, when the blogosphere first kind of stumbled into our politics 20 years ago over the war, over the Iraq war, I welcomed them into the Democratic Party as an establishment Democrat. And I brought Marcos from Daily Kos to his first DC event. And Marcos and I didn't agree on anything. I was pro-Iraq war. He was against it. He was more left-wing than I was on many issues. But we became partners, and I wrote the foreword to his book. And what I wrote was that, you know, we all in the Democratic Party have to view ourselves as playing different positions on the same team, right? We all don't have to agree. We don't actually want to agree. We you know, agreement, you know, I don't like the concept of unity, frankly, because I think unity involves, it's a static state. I think what our democracy requires is debate and discourse in Congress and people coming together. If you really think about the core idea of our founding fathers in the way they built our government, it was called a Congress, right? It was a place of disparate voices coming together to find common ground. That process of finding common ground, connecting with others, respecting people's differences, right, is the core of what it means to be a small d Democrat. And so I do think, to me, I view the Democratic Party as a family, dysfunctional, occasionally functional in all the beauty. And
everybody's laughing, by the way. Yes,
yeah,
of course we are.
Yeah, right. But I think even what you're doing, I want to say 2 things about what you said, and then I've gotten out all my top line points, is that I think this thing that's going on with Zoom and the groups that are sprung up organically all around the country is among the most remarkable things that I've ever seen in all my years of doing this. And I don't think the National Democrats have any idea this is actually happening. No. And you know what? I know that you don't always get along with the Virginia party and everything. That's okay, right? Like, that's all okay. Everyone has a job to do. You've got your job, they've got their job. Sometimes you're going to be together, sometimes you aren't. But thank God you're all here. And thank God that you all have ownership over this organization and this community that you've built, because that lowering the bar, it used to be if you wanted to be a Democratic activist, some of us have done this, right? You go to somebody's house every 3 months, you have silly debates, you have to leave your family for 3 hours, right? Your kids at home. Now you can do events like this while you're cooking dinner or having, you know, being at home. Yes. And the barrier to entry for engagement has been dramatically lowered, and that's made us much stronger. The second thing I just want to say is that, and I didn't cover it, is this idea, we covered it a little bit, but I've come to really believe something through my journey that I didn't really understand before, which is the role of positive and negative sentiment. And I want to talk about this for a minute. I think that Greater MAGA's core strategy is to make us feel bad about America, about our leaders, about our democracy, about our institutions, about each other, about the American project, about everything. They want us to feel bad. Donald Trump's speech that he gave at the convention in 2016 could have been written by Vladimir Putin in the way that he described the history of the United States. He came to the, in his inaugural speech and talked about carnage, right? When we know that we are in the greatest country in the history of the world, and that the American project is among the most noble of any governing project in all of human history. I reject all of this so profoundly. And I think that part of what the right does, and Fox and all of them, is they talk down America. They want us to feel bad. We have to
really bullies. Mm-hmm.
And it's part of what authoritarians do, is they want us to give up. They want us to concede and allow them to run the country without challenge, right? What you're doing, the patriotism that you're exhibiting by even being here, the love of country that you're exhibiting by participating in an organization like this, we have to get more intentional about responding to their negative sentiment with positive sentiment. I felt that in 2002, in my journey through these organizations, and the reason I was getting loud with you, was that we had turned on ourselves. We had lost confidence in ourselves. We had started to believe that Joe Biden was a failure and a bad leader, that we were constantly focused on all the things we hadn't done as opposed to all the good things that we had done, and that we became a negative sentiment machine. We can't out-negative them. The way that we beat them is through positive sentiment and through talking about the greatness of America, the strength of our president, the strong party that we're part of. Part of my hope, my homework assignment for you in the next 2 years, is that make more of your engagement in this system, have it be positive. Hold your tongue when you want to lash out at somebody and attack somebody. 80-90% of my Twitter engagement now is positive sentiment. It used to be probably 50-50. I've changed fundamentally the way that I engage. And I think this is something, the way we beat MAGA is by reminding America and Americans what a great country we are, what an amazing, remarkable, how far we've come under Joe Biden's leadership, what a good political party the Democratic Party's been, for 100 years or more, right? I think that's how we win. That's our superpower, is optimism and hopium, as it was called during the election.
Optimism and oomph. And Fennell, I know you probably have a question on the tip of your tongue. This is right up your alley.
It really is. I have a question and a comment. And so the comment is, I love that. I used to do a TikTok, and it would say, "Don't poo-poo on my president." And I was always so frustrated by the way that people talked about our own party, talked about our president. And I thought, we want other people to understand how wonderful he is and what great work he's doing. And yet we're poo-pooing all over him. We don't want him to come to this, or they're saying how terrible he is. And we have to lift up our own candidates. This is our team. So I'm so happy to hear you say that. And I just want everybody to just stop doing that, because he's doing amazing work. I don't care how old he is. We always say it's not or, it's and. But what I'd like you to talk about is how we continue to do that in this frame where people are talking about who's going to run, as well as rural communities. Do you have a thought about how we really engage rural communities in a way that helps to win state elections, even if you can't win a district or local?
So the way I talk about the presidential election in 2024, and I've been quoted in major newspapers, so this is what I say to reporters, not just to all of you, is that Joe Biden, if he chooses to run, he won't be challenged, and I will be with him on day one, and he will have the nomination will be his, and we will be focused not on a contentious primary, but on defeating whoever the Republican nominee is. If he chooses not to run, I think we're going to have a wonderful and spirited primary. And I think that whoever wins out of this next generation, will be just as good as Joe Biden, be different, right? It'll be a different candidate. But I think the key is that we will be able, whoever is our nominee is going to be operating in a fundamental environment where we can say that we've made the country better, and they're still too crazy. And that is what 2024 is going to be, whoever is our nominee, right? Because all the work that we did over the last 2 years and the bills that we've passed, which people are going to have much more awareness of, the infrastructure bill, the CHIPS bill, and and the climate bill, right? That we will be able to say that, you gave us power, we made things better, they're still too crazy. And that will be true of whoever our nominee is and whoever their nominee is, right? Because Ron DeSantis is just as MAGA as Donald Trump. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise, right? And so I think that's why I'm so optimistic about 2024. We strengthened our position in the battlegrounds. They are not going to be able to run away and distance themselves from MAGA. In the battleground states, people have now voted against MAGA for three consecutive elections. They have real muscle memory about that. And so that's why I'm optimistic. In the rural area, I don't have any secret sauce here. I mean, I think that what it is like everything in politics, which is it has to be important to you, and people have to feel that it's important to you. So much of politics is about just honoring, respecting people, and showing up is Woody, I don't want to quote Woody Allen anymore, but I mean, I do believe that 90% of politics is showing up. And I think it's, we have to make it a priority. If it's not a priority, people feel it. When it's a priority, then your priorities change. Then the things that you talk about and what you're fighting for change. But I think we have a lot we can bring to rural communities, from the rural broadband initiative that the president has pushed, to the very strong economy that we have today, to continuing to try to push create American opportunities for American farmers abroad. There's a strong agenda that we can bring to rural communities, but it has to matter to us. There has to be money behind it. We have to not, helicopter in and then run back to Northern Virginia, to Arlington, or, Alexandria, right? It's got to become something that matters to us. And that's the starting place, I think.
Yeah. Well, I would love to, we have only a few more minutes. So
yeah,
we're talking about obviously there's a lot of this is about the media working at different levels. I saw you mentioned Daily Kos today, and I saw that there's a big action because they are laying off some people at that publication. And we're seeing that decimation of journalism. So I love that there are people doing that work at the local level, seeing how people digest this news. And so there's a lot of ways for people in this room to get involved in all the different levels of that amplification and media part of it. The part that is also, I think, equally, and if not more, also a problem is how we run politics state by state. Each state is a little different, right? Each state party it also has its own issues or strengths. And I think that, like you said, when back in Obama brought this new idea, had this huge coalition, how we built this ground game, this field game, and then, understand we lost that. And then I think there's a lot to how we get frustrated in our own state, like how we just reinvent the wheel every year. The idea you pack up, consultants class come in, they suck all the money out, they want to run ads. And so we don't have sometimes the power of that. We get frustrated. So we do. And so when we had to deal with the top of the ticket comes in and runs it, they did a really shitty field job, for instance. And we're trying to struggle when these people are making these big decisions up here. We don't have control over some of that, but we have to make something good out of it. So I think in your mind too, in getting in your position to talk to the party, to the DNC, to these investors and say, hey, we need to change the mindset, invest in the grassroots. How can we make running elections in Virginia is just exhausting, right? So what are some of your thoughts on that? I mean, it's really key to winning is talking to voters, talking to people directly face to face and building that ground game. And we need to invest in it.
This conversation has been happening since I've been in the business, right? 30 years ago. And, let me just make a couple observations, right? One is that I think we know how to win. And how to transform a state. I think Arizona, if you look at in 2004, when Bush was the last Republican president to win the popular vote and the Electoral College, so the best showing by the Republican Party, in the last 30 years, there's only 6 states that have flipped from Republican to Democrat from 2004 to 2020. Virginia, Georgia, and the 4 southwestern states, Arizona, Colorado, Nevada, New Mexico. So you're one of 6 states that have flipped over at the presidential level. I was involved in what happened in Virginia, and part of this had to do with you had leaders like Tim Kaine and Terry McAuliffe and Mark Warner, who created bridges for people who didn't believe in the Republican Party any longer or uncomfortable that they were Democrats they could touch and feel, that were not, crazy Democrats, but people that were sort of midwives, if you want to say that, to Republican people who may have gone the Republican path, which was really important. But what happened in Georgia and Arizona was they built in each of those states with different circumstances. Local people built 24/7, 365 campaigns where things were always on. There was always voter registration happening, voter contact happening, campaigns happening, right? All that stuff in the way that you guys are always on, right? You're here every week just doing your thing, right? And we know that's what worked there. Why we're not really doing that everywhere is something that I don't really know. I mean, so for example, I have a lot of friends in North Carolina, and we had another disappointing election in North Carolina. And I've said to them, is like, at the end of the day, no one's going to do this work for you. No one did this work for Stacey Abrams. No one did this work for Ruben Gallego and the others in Arizona who built the modern, who saw the flipping of the Democratic Party there. They did it themselves. And what you're doing is you're doing it yourself. Right. And I think this is how it has to happen. I think this issue of everything being lost and falling apart from election to election, you're going to help prevent that from happening by being here as a permanent institution. Right. And so it is a major issue. I mean, I think that the lack of institutional memory and the way these things get rebuilt every couple of years I appreciate you raising it, because I think it's actually a much bigger problem than people understand. Because there are things that I've done in the party 20 years ago, 16 years ago. For example, I helped introduce bilingual polling and Spanish language advertising to the Democratic Party 20 years ago. There are things that I brought to the Democratic Party 20, 15 years ago that were lost, by the National Party. And it is, and meanwhile, I've moved on to try to solve other problems. So the institutional memory thing is actually something that is real. And one of the ways we mitigate against it is by having organizations like yours that can remind people, right, about what happened and get in the face of the consultants and the people, and you need to do that. I mean, and listen, I just want to say, I know you're not. Listen, I'm just a guy, by the way, right? Don't come from a wealthy family. I'm not a politician, right? I'm like all of you. I'm just a guy, right? I'm just a regular citizen who has been committed to this work. And I'll just close by saying that it's why I believe in what you're doing, because I've demonstrated in my own career that just a regular person who gave a shit and worked really hard could make a big difference in their country, the destiny of their country. And that's what you're doing every day. I feel like we're kindred spirits here. And I think it's the only way, and my mantra has always been, is that it's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission. And which is, not always endeared me to everybody in the family, right? But it's what is required if we're going to do the right thing for the American people and for your communities, which is to not get in line and to take orders, but to do what you think is right and to fight like hell every day. And I love the spirit in which you're approaching all this, because it's the only way that our democracy is going to beat the autocrats.
Well, I'm going to say that we invited a lot of postcarders in the room, and before we have to sign off, we're going to get to Frank. I'm so excited to talk to Frank and some of the actions we had, but loud for the next guest. Let's bring up Frank Ravitch, expert on law and religion, and you are all the way in Michigan at Michigan State University. So Frank, how are you feeling? You ready for our discussion on law and religion?
I'm ready.
Okay, and I'm going to tell you this, the audience, that a while back, I really got this bee in my bonnet to talk further about what's going on at the Supreme Court. And I was really kind of concerned about what I see is this using this idea of religious liberty to actually take our liberties away. So I thought you'd be the perfect person to talk about kind of where we are, why we're here today, and give us an idea in your expert mind, what you're seeing at that level. And then maybe at the end, we could talk about things we could do about it. But yeah, give us a little genesis of this journey of what we're seeing today.
Yeah, I mean, it's, sort of Mitch McConnell had engaged in a different kind of court packing through using the process to depending on how you view it, I think it's safe to say steal a couple of seats on the Supreme Court. And that's had real serious consequences in the law and religion area. So you all know about the Dobbs decision, which overturned Roe v. Wade. What was a little sneaky was 3 days after that, the court decided a case called Kennedy v. Bremerton School District, where they also overturned 50, 60 years of precedent that deal with the establishment of religion. Some people use the term separation of church and state. What was left of that case essentially abandoned. And so there's the court has essentially taken concepts of separation and subsumed them within free exercise of religion. So if you're somebody who may be more socially conservative, your religious freedom rights are very well protected. If you're a religious minority, your rights may not be as well protected, which is counterintuitive because it used to be understood kind of the other way. And Dobbs took away, of course, an essential right. In a way, the Kennedy case took away a right, because separation of church and state is not a right, or the concept we use in the field, we use the term establishment concerns. But for common language, this concept of separation really helps protect religious pluralism. And in fact, a lot of religious people support it for that reason. And taking that away really can hurt religious minorities. And that's what we're seeing, right? That's what we're seeing.
Yeah, and it's been super effective, and meaning that they're able to go from the states to the Supreme Court level to use this concept of, this freedoms and religious freedom to discriminate against women, for contraception, from LGBTQ marriage, if we're talking marriage equality. We've seen some of these really bizarre cases, the one about the website, then that's where the creative website, and really saying, it's my right not to serve certain clients. And it's really dangerous. So in your mind, how did we kind of evolve from when we had talked earlier, and we talked about how you started in this, yourself a religious person, a spiritual person, and the Republican Party is where you were doing this work. And talk a little bit about that and how we see this totally turning this on its head, and kind of the perversion of using religion in these cases to sort of undermine and take, I guess, to get to a theocracy. Where are we going with this, right?
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, I grew up in Pennsylvania, and at that time in Pennsylvania, if you were pro-choice, if you were against school prayer, you actually were more likely to be Republican. It's not something that would even be conceivable today. Right. But I remember when Barbara Hafer ran for governor against Casey, right? Casey was a strongly pro-life Democrat, and Hafer was a pro-choice Republican. Obviously today she would be a Democrat. Maybe, I don't know, maybe he would be on the other end. But having grown up in that environment, one thing that I have seen in light of what happened in June with Dobbs and with Kennedy is some of those former Republicans, independents, who maybe were on the fence, and I think this did play very heavily into the election in November. I think this idea of the Supreme Court taking rights away for the first time and also for this sort of radicalization that you spoke about earlier within the Republican Party has turned a lot of people off. And I think that this shift really allows, I think, for the Democratic Party to gain allies like myself, who tend not to be particularly overly political in a way. I mean, I'm a constitutional scholar, right? But who for the first time in our, have lost faith in the court and have lost faith in the protection, support the protection of rights, but have lost faith in the court's ability to protect rights because they're unaware of their own preconceptions. So I think we can build a lot of bridges. I really do. It's easy to destroy bridges. It's so easy. But here's an opportunity to build bridges with allies who will support pro-choice candidates, who will support candidates that don't want government in a woman's uterus, that don't want government in our prayers, that don't want government telling us how to be religious. And so I think there's a real possibility for ally and bridge building here.
I love that ally and bridge building. You talked about that. And I think that's where I want to go next before we wrap up, is what we see that's kind of, if you want to call it exciting, happening to counter this. And that's where I'd like to punch right now with, is that other religions have different ideas. And so they're bringing some court cases. Talk about what's happening to counter and how we're using this right back at you. Like, here's the mirror. We're going to, tell us about that. I think our group will be interested in what's happening.
Yeah, and this is a strategy that I think has been used as the court has shifted, really with the appointment of Alito in the early 2000s. There really began to be sort of a shift in the court on these religion issues.
Right.
And so one of the things that those in the field have done is say, okay, if the court says, well, this is, we're going to look at history and tradition. We're going to have this religious, if there's an exception to a law, you have to give a religion exception. Well, okay, if you really mean that, and it's not just politics in a robe, then let's test that. So let's say, okay, well, there are religions, my religion, I'm Jewish, right? So Reform and conservative Judaism support a woman's right to choose, a woman's, and anybody's choice, anybody's ability to control their body, to control their destiny, their fate, is something that's given by God. And in that tradition, see it in the Episcopalian as well, and in a number of others. And so, okay, then this is a violation of religious freedom. And so let's bring claims based on this, because there are valid religious freedom claims. If the court meant what it said in these cases, and it wasn't just a perk for social conservatives, then the rabbi who challenged the anti-abortion law in Florida should win. The plaintiffs, some of whom are Jewish, some of whom are Episcopalian, some of whom are atheists, all of whom have very strong views on religion or non-religion and its roles here, they should be able to win.
Let me just interrupt real quick, like being forced to pray a certain way at school, and everybody, it's these kind of things where it seems like you should be able to bring a case. Is there anything at the Supreme Court right now that is challenging this, or will they even take this kind of case that would turn would turn their thinking on their head, or it would expose them for being the hypocrites that they are? So what's going on now?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think these cases, they're relatively new because they just overturned Roe in June. And then the state started with these laws. And so we have these cases that are challenging the anti-abortion laws in a number of states, using religious freedom challenges under state religious freedom restoration acts, or Marcy Hamilton has brought a whole bunch of cases, or supported a whole bunch of cases using the federal free exercise clause And so these cases have to sort of percolate through the court.
It'll take time, right?
It'll take time. They will get there. There's also people like myself who are, the court's using this history and tradition concept in Dobbs, in the religion clauses, and we're saying, okay, you want to talk about history and tradition? Let's talk about history and tradition, not just your selected history and tradition, but let's look at the actual history and tradition and starting to bring challenges using the court's own, I call it sort of intellectual aikido, right? Aikido is the Japanese martial art where you use the force of somebody else against them so that a 50-pound person can throw a 300-pound person. So we use the force of the court's arguments to see if they're serious about, or whether this was simply a justification for a result.
Yes.
Because if they're serious, then fine, we can all be protected. But if not, then...
my guess is they're just protecting their own class. But I think what we're going to see, it's going to be a long slog. We have the anniversary on Sunday of this 50 years of Roe, and it's really disheartening, for women in the sense of our constitutional rights. We don't exist in the Constitution, and now it's really that right to privacy and all that. So Frank,
the idea that government has any business in a woman's uterus is ridiculous.
It's ridiculous.
I mean, government has no business telling a woman what to do with her body.
And we will end on that note. That's a good note because we're at 1:02. And I just want to say, Frank, it's been a really pleasure and joy to meet you. You're just a fabulous person to chat with. So hopefully we'll be stay in community.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
I'll stick around a little bit afterwards.
Yeah. Oh, please. There may be some good questions. I know there's a lot of people in the room that may have some good questions. All right, everybody. It's that time on Friday that we get ready to wrap up and then get ready for the after chat. So I want to thank you if you decided to become a patron today and support our show for $5 or $10 a month. We love it because, again, this is how we're getting loud and proud doing this work. So we appreciate you. Follow us on social media. We love that. That will get the word out. Eileen already has her hand up for the after chat. And you will get the recap email out. And that gives you all the links today. So that will be awesome. And then I want to say a big thank you to this awesome team: Robin Warner, Fennell Norton, Heidi Dragneff, Denise Orsinger, and Laura Martinez, Michelle McKinney, who is our newcomer chat liaison, and our content concierge to keep our words very great: Julie Galdo, Alvina McCall, and Sally Renholt. And I want to thank everybody in the room getting loud and proud. I love seeing everybody. Let's run credits, and I'll see you on the other side.